Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. My name is Annie Sajid. I'm a senior majoring in English and Women's Studies. Thank you all so much for attending the Muslim Student Association's, in collaboration with Center for Education of Women, MESA, and Diversity Education, Gender and Islam Symposium, Part 2, Reclaiming Our Voices, the Identity Narratives of American Muslim Women. I have the privilege and honor of being your MC tonight, but before we begin, I'd like to invite Brother Humam Mullis and Sister Tasleem to do the recitation and Quran translation.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولقد مننا عليك مرة أخرى إذ أوحينا إلى أمك ما يوحى إن اقذفيه في التابوت فاقذفيه في اليم فليلقه اليم بالساحل يأخذه عدو لي وعدو له وألقيت عليك محبة مني ولتصنع على عيني إذ تمشي أختك فتقول هل أدلكم على من يكفله فرجعناك إلى أمك كي تقر عينها ولا تحزن فقتلت نفسا فنجيناك من الغم وفتناك فتونا فلبثت سنين في أهل مدين ثم جئت على قدره يا موسى واصطنعتك لنفسي اذهب أنت وأخوك بآياتي ولا تنيا في ذكري اذهبا إلى فرعون إنه طغى وقولا له قولا لينا لعله يتذكر أو يخشى صدق الله العظيم.
We have again bestowed our favor upon you. Recall when we indicated to your mother through inspiration. Put the baby into a chest and then throw him in the river. The river will throw him up on the shore, and then an enemy of mine and an enemy of his will take him. And I spread my love over you in order that you might be reared in my sight. Recall when your sister went along, saying, shall I direct you to one who will take charge of him? Thus we brought you back to your mother so that her heart might be gladdened and she might not grieve. Moses, recall when you slew a person. We delivered you from distress and made you go through several trials. Then you stayed for several years among the people of Midian, and now you have come at the right moment as ordained. I have chosen you for my service. So go forth, both you and your brother, with my signs, and do not slacken in remembering me. Go both of you to Pharaoh, for he has transgressed all bounds, and speak to him gently. Perhaps he may take heed or fear Allah.
Thank you, Humam and Tasleem. So before we begin, I'd like to give some background on how the Gender and Islam Symposium event series occurred. 2 weeks ago, the GI crew, this is what we call ourselves, the planning committee, we organized a lecture and panel discussion on Muslim masculinity. That event aimed to shed light on how male privilege operates within Muslim American communities. Tonight, as part of the Gender and Islam Symposium, Reclaiming Our Voices, the Identity Narratives of American Muslim Women, is meant to challenge misconceptions of Muslim American women being portrayed as agentless victims. Personally, growing up as a Muslim American woman in a post-9/11 world, I was constantly asked to explain if I felt oppressed, if I was a victim, how did my father treat me, all these ideas in which I felt as a token to speak out against. Muslim American women have been viewed through this voyeuristic and racialized lens. The West is often focused on liberating us. This event will be challenging these imperialistic notions by granting Muslim American women a space to share their narratives and reclaim their voices from the multiple institutions which do not allow them to highlight their agency, voice, and activism. This event will consist of a lecture, a panelist discussion between 3 Muslim American women activists, and finally performances. We hope that the event will be able to engage members of our campus community to think critically about the intersections of gender, race, and religion. Following that, there will be a reception to celebrate Muslim women's voices and activism. First off, I have the pleasure of introducing our first panelist who will be sharing a couple words. Najah Bazzy, registered nurse and CEO of Diversity Specialists in Transcultural Healthcare Solutions, utilizes her role as a nurse consultant to help her colleagues better understand their Muslim patients and how to best serve them. She is also the executive director and founder of Zaman International, a humanitarian nonprofit that provides critical services such as refugee support, a mobile food pantry, International Clean Well Project, and crisis assistance to Detroit and international communities. She lectures on a variety of topics, including social issues, spirituality, inter- and intra-faith matters, leadership, and youth activism. Please join me in welcoming her.
Good evening, everyone. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, I greet you all with our greeting in Islam. Peace and blessings be upon each and every one of you. Annie, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And I'd also like to thank Zainab and Aisha and Sarah and the GI, although as a nurse, GI means something very different, and Iman. And I'd also like to acknowledge the other two panelists, Dr. Ruby and Sister Noor Ali. So thank you, everyone, and anyone else who I've missed for putting this wonderful event together. It's a great room. It's really beautiful here. This is the first time in this room for me, though not the first time on campus, but always happy to come into the halls of University of Michigan and its intellect. I always say when I come on campus here, I just feel like, you know, intelligence just comes right into you. I'd also like to welcome my two sons, who I think sometimes have no choice but to come to these events because their mother's speaking, and so thank you to both of you, Bilal and Yusuf, for always making the time and being so gracious with it. So folks, I was given the very difficult task of speaking about yourself. Ouch! It's just kind of so hard to do that. It really, truly is. You know, tell me to talk about medical ethics in a heartbeat, transcultural theory, absolutely. I can go on for hours about it. But talking about oneself, especially as a Muslim who sees herself as a servant, is a very, very difficult thing for me to do. So I think in these next 15 minutes, maybe what would be best for me is to talk about the stories rather than about myself and how those stories have really, I think, impacted and influenced some of the direction that I've taken and choices that I've made. I suppose I'm probably not one who really thinks that I have to reclaim my voice. I am one who believes that my voice was given to me by God, my Creator, and since He's given it to me, I don't need permission from anyone else to give it to me. And so I call Him the greatest feminist there is, even though we use the royal he, but I just feel that God knows what He's created, and so I'm not one who feels that I have to really fight for my rights. I just take them. So that's somewhat the perspective I come from. Some of the things that have, I think, influenced life, though, I do want to say that growing up in America, people get confused often about me, by the way. People sometimes think that I have converted to Islam, and I say yes, I have in many ways, because I think that the faith is something that needs to be intellectually embraced. And so growing up, you wonder about these questions when you're a child, and whose God is right, and you're walking, you know, to elementary school, back and forth. We grew up in an extremely diverse community in the south end of Dearborn, where many refugees were coming. That's where I was born and raised. And so we grew up with all kinds of people from around the world in that south end, because everyone was walking their way without transportation. The fathers would walk their way to be workers on the assembly line for the Ford Motor Company. So I would walk to school with my Italian Catholic friends, and some of our Mexican boys were altar boys in churches. And one day my girlfriend, Sandra Tomasi, who I speak of so often, she says to me as we were walking home, I think we're maybe 8 or 9 years old, I'm not 100% sure, she says, my mom said that you're going to be going to hell if you're not Catholic, and I worry about you, and maybe I could invite you to come to catechism. And so, you know, when you're children, you're very innocent and nothing really bothers you all that much. You're just friends growing up. But I went home and really thought about religious identity. And I think that I've always been deeply spiritual. I think maybe from the womb. And so I needed to make sure that the God, the family that I was born into and the God that they believed in was the God that I believed in. And so that led to a lot of religious studies for me. And I will say that I intellectually chose this beautiful faith. And I chose it, and it shaped my life in many ways. My work is about Islam. I think I live, breathe it, because for me it's a cellular thing. It's not a choice in me. It's an intellectual choice, but now that I've accepted this way of life, it's about everything that I do. I think it's about the way you walk and the way you talk and the way you handle yourself and the way that you serve and the way that you give. And it's just simply, we say it's a way of life, and it truly is a way to live and a way of life. But I will tell you that the ways in which this faith have influenced me have been very, very powerful. I grew up Arab and I grew up American. My family's been here 116 years, so that's a long, long time. And I'm a Sushi, which means that I was raised in a Sunni Shia family, which also lended another level of diversity. And by the way, we are talking about a Sushi of America club, if anyone's interested. I have a brother who has muscular dystrophy. He's never walked a day in his life, and I grew up taking care of my brother Sam. So between taking care of my brother, between the intergenerational family units that many of us grew up in, with grandmothers living with you in the home, between the Arabic language, which was very flowery and very rich, and between my American identity, between being, you know, in kindergarten and pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and being on stage for Christmas concerts, and all of the things that public schools used to do, and Easter egg hunts, and Halloween, and all those things, and Thanksgiving, everything that we grew up with as part of our American identity, and then growing up with Islamic identity, this is how life was shaped. If you were to think about a Sunday, this is the only way I can describe it. I would say that the first scoop of ice cream was being an Arab. And we were imbued and endowed with everything about the Arab culture that there could be, from food to language to love of family, to music, to dance, to art, to value systems of hospitality, to giving, and so much more. Very involved in family and community. My mother, my grandmother, they were all activists in their own way. The second scoop of ice cream on the Sunday, I think, would have been our Americanness growing up. And being sure that we were well-spoken, getting 4.0s, being sure that we were involved, but not too involved. Being sure that we had friends, but not friends who were too close. And sharing this American landscape. And we did that. So we would knock on doors for muscular dystrophy and raise money. We were very much a part of the American landscape. And then Islam was the sprinkles. We prayed, we fasted, we went to mosque once in a while, Sunday school. I'm 52, so when I was growing up, there was not the Islam that you know of now. But as I grew up and made some choices about my own life, and as I intellectually accepted my faith, I saw that my faith could really shape everything about me. And what I would say, the message I want you to take away with me is this. There's no such thing for me as being an American, and being a Muslim, and being an Arab. To me, these are three identities that were put inside of a blender. They were blended. They were three separate identities at one point in time in life. Put in a blender, they are a new thing. And this is what I think America and the West needs to understand, that there are many of us who are blended identities. And for me now, the Sunday looks like this. The first scoop of ice cream is my faith, and the second scoop of ice cream is my faith, and the sprinkles are my faith. Because it's so blended that my faith is what actually drives and directs every decision that I make. Not because I'm sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, what would God do with me if I don't do this? It's not that. It's not about the fear of God for me at all. It's about the love of God. And it's about understanding that He has created humanity and that this humanity is his crowning creation. So I've become colorblind. I have no race issues. I don't have sectarian issues. I don't have Arab American issues. I just love humanity. And I love humanity because I love my Lord. And because if you were good enough for him to create, then far be it for me to judge what he created. And it's in that level of humility that I hope to lead. So I am a nurse by trade. I am a critical care nurse who did open heart surgery for about 18 years on and off. One day, this is what this taught me. Annie, you're gonna have to give me like a finger or two so I know what my time is. So one day, and you know, sometimes you need permission to drop different things in life, like racism. But by the way, I grew up in Dearborn on the border of Detroit, 1960, so I experienced the race riots. I experienced the 1967 race riots. I saw the National Guard on ponies, beating black men, beating Mexican people. I saw that. I saw the city of Detroit in flames. These were things that as a child you never forget. And they're things that you want to distance yourself from. And they're things that give you hope that you can change future. So while working as a nurse, I want to tell you that there was one really, I think, life-changing moment for me. And I worked critical care, so I was in an intensive care unit, and I was working midnights. And if anyone, for all of you pre-med students, raise your hand. Oh, my goodness gracious. Okay, God bless you. So for the pre-med students, when you're doing open heart surgery, after the surgery is done, the chest is wired together. So the breastbone is actually wired together. And so I was taking care of my patient. He was probably 50 or so, I can't quite remember. And I remember seeing that he was running into problems. And I could tell by the EKG monitoring his heart. And I knew right away that this was going to be an emergency. Well, one of the things that I would say my Arabness has given me, I grew up in the kitchen. So I'm a great cook and I learned how to multitask, and I'm very serious about being raised in an environment where you learn to do this. So in the hospital, my job was often the code blue. It was often the drug box, because I knew how to multitask. I could get the drugs into the hands of physicians right away and anticipate what those drugs were. So this gentleman was getting in trouble, and I knew that he was going to be dying. It was going to be an emergency. So I called the 911 code blue. Now, if any of you worked in hospitals or seen this, you will see it. You've seen it on ER. People like run into the hospital room that you're in, and there's all kinds of chaos. And the doctor, who I knew very well, and he trusted my judgment, I trusted his, he's like, Najah, we gotta split the chest. And I'm like, oh my God, we gotta go to the OR. And he's like, no, we gotta split the chest here. We gotta do it right now. Grab the emergency kit. I grab the emergency kit. I am shaking, but your adrenaline's taking over, right? So I'm shaking, but I grab the kit. He takes out a saw, and he saws open this gentleman's chest. And then he gives me the suction, because this gentleman's having a clinical problem called tamponade. So he suctions around the heart, and then he says to me, pump the heart, Najah, and he's yelling at me, pump the heart. So, you know, you're not thinking. In that moment, I put my hand on his heart, and I began to pump his heart. That's called cardiac massage. You know, after the adrenaline wore off, and after the event happened and he managed to live, I thought to myself, after I could collect my thoughts, that human heart is the same human heart you have. It's the same human heart you have, Annie. It's the same human heart every single one of you have in this room. There is no distinction between us internally. The distinction between us is externally. I'm not interested in the external. I'm only interested in the internal. And that's where I find equity. And that's where I find my sense of justice. And that's where my work is. So I don't care about what country you're from or what language you speak. I don't care if you're really affluent or if you're poverty-stricken poor. To me, you're a human being. If I can help you, you are my brother or sister in humanity. That's what I am, that's what I do. As a result of this work, I became a transcultural nurse. There's only 2 of us in the country, in the world actually, who specialize in Muslim healthcare practices and belief, one in Australia and myself. Basically, long story short, I just took a theory and a model, put it to clinical practice, and we launched this national program for transcultural clinical care. And out of that work came the humanitarian work. So currently at Zaman International, and I'll wrap up in 1 minute, I hope. Zaman International is an organization, and the word Zaman means time. And my thought was, what will we do with our time as stewards on this earth? How will we serve? And that's my daily supplication to God, to make me your servant, the way you want me to serve, not the way I think I ought to serve. So I've even had a paradigm shift in the way that I think because of this faith that I call Islam. And so in Zaman International, we take care of marginalized women and children, women who are abandoned, abused, divorced, widowed, or if there is a man in their life, he's either terminally ill, or he's a drug addict, or incarcerated, or something like that. So we take care of lots of women and their children. The other thing that we do is that we feed people. We feed lots of people. And so we have a daily food pantry, and then we also have shop for healthy foods, and then we have a vocational training program called Boost for the women that we take care of, so they can become empowered to help take care of themselves. And we bury babies, and that's a whole nother story. So we bury babies who parents can't afford infant burial for them, and we build wells internationally, because everybody deserves to eat, and everybody deserves to drink, and everybody deserves to have a home, and everyone deserves the same equity. And I'm most inspired, just so you know, by birds. Because we have this nest that sits on top of, on this thing in our house, in the front door, and every single year this bird comes and builds a nest, and I just watch that bird build that nest and go get everything it needs. And I think, I can't believe that human beings can't do this for each other when a bird knows how to build a nest and take care of itself. That's how simple life is for me. So thank you so very much for your time and energy, and I appreciate your listening ears. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's very insightful, and I love the metaphors. And I love to, when we have the panelist discussion, I have a couple of questions I'd love to ask. So our next speaker, I'd like to introduce Noor Ali. A native of Palestine, Noor Ali was born in Jerusalem and raised in Rockford, Illinois. She spent her high school years in Ramallah, West Bank, only to return to the States in order to pursue a BS in psychology at Loyola University in Chicago. It is at Loyola that she moderated her first dialogue on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which sparked her interest in the field. She went on to complete a master's in the School of Social Work at the University of Michigan, where she began her work with a program on intergroup relations, along with collaborating on the creation of and research for the Arab-Jewish Dialogue course. Noor also serves as Student Affairs Program Manager of IGR. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you, Annie. Hi, everyone. Salam, peace and blessings be upon you all. I just want to say I'm so happy to see so many people in here. I'm just like in awe of it all. So I'm flattered and humbled by your presence, and humbled also by the words of Sister Najah. Thank you so much. I'm often seen as a little bit of a Debbie Downer. I feel so inspired by the words that I hear, but I work for a program, and the work that I do is very many times very depressing in the sense that I kind of feel like I need to be realistic about certain things. And so today I'm going to talk to you about sort of where I'm from and what I do and what has brought me to tonight. Like Annie said, I grew up in Northern Illinois, Rockford, Illinois, a place where there were not very many Muslims at all, and my mother was one of the only women in town that wore a hijab. Actually, at that time, she was one of the only women in Palestine wearing a hijab before she came here. And so that tells you a little bit more about myself. I'm a second generation American Palestinian Muslim, and my parents got married and moved over here, and I lived in Rockford for about 14 years. I was the darkest girl in class, so it was really interesting. having this identity where a lot of people would say, no, assimilate, you know, just act American, why don't you just be normal? And, you know, my mom being strong-willed woman that she was, giving this powerful image of what being feminine meant, said, no, you know, you're a Muslim first, and that's what you're going to be. And so that's what I was. For 14 years, I was an American Muslim. And I'd hear about sort of my native background and what it meant to be Arab, but really what my parents focused on was, no, you're an American Muslim. In that, you know, you'd hear like bits and pieces of, you know, maybe, you know, your mom shouldn't be wearing that, or maybe that's oppressive. But you know, my mom went to college and she was a pharmacist and she did everything she ever wanted to do, and she was an activist, and she taught us in Sunday school, and her and my father built up the masjid in Rockford, Illinois, so it felt like I wasn't missing anything. Well, when I was 14, I moved to Ramallah in the West Bank and found out what it meant to be Arab and what it meant to be Palestinian, and all of a sudden that huge piece of my identity was all of a sudden very apparent to me. And you know what? It didn't matter that I was Muslim anymore. I no longer could say I'm Muslim in Palestine, because guess what? There were a lot of other Muslims, and that wasn't going to make you unique anymore. And so I had to figure out what other identities I had. And so I spent a couple years doing that, and then really hating living over there and wishing that I could come back, and missing being American, missing my friends that I grew up with in Rockford, Illinois. And then in 2000, the second Intifada started. And for those of you who don't know what an Intifada is, that's the second uprising in Palestine. And so for 2 years that I lived there, it was very peaceful. And then all of a sudden, the earth shook and I no longer knew peace. And all of a sudden, I no longer knew what it meant to be American, because being Palestinian was so very strong. It just meant so much that the whole world was like asking for a small piece of land, or fighting over this small piece of land. And so for the 2 years that followed, it went from bombings and checkpoints to being kicked out of my home, and being not able to take classes or go to school because we were under house arrest. And then finally I graduated high school in 2002, and I no longer could go to college, so they said, my parents said, okay, go back to the United States. Well, it had only been a year since 9/11, and I wasn't really sure what it meant to be Muslim anymore in the United States. So, I mean, that's a long-winded, detailed description of my childhood and my teenage years. Fast forward a few years, and I decided, what do I do about this idea of being Palestinian and being Muslim and being a woman, and what do I want to do with what does it mean to be a female? What does it mean to have these rights? And being very blind to the fact that I was an oppressed person, and the only things that I really recognized was being Palestinian. I came to know, after coming here to study social work at the School of Social Work, I came to find out the different things that we have in our identities, the different pieces of our identities that give us power and privilege in society. And I had this rude awakening about 4 years ago that I can't deny that we're different. I wish I could, but I can no longer pretend that I don't hold privilege and that I don't oppress people, and I'm not oppressed myself, and that I want to be held accountable for the privilege that I hold, the same way that I want those who oppress me and the people of my identities to be held accountable for the privilege that they hold. And so I was really lucky to find this excellent job at the University of Michigan working for the program on intergroup relations. And there I work as with student affairs. I teach a class on training students for dialogue facilitation, and as well as the second course where we coach students to become dialogue, as they're facilitating dialogues on campus. And I'm so passionate about dialogue. And it all started from this piece of, I guess, being unsure. What does it mean to be, basically? So to take a step back and just go back to why I came into dialogue. Being in Palestine made me really question, you know, having been raised in the United States and not knowing what hate was, and not really feeling hatred, and not really knowing discrimination, not really ever been told that so-and-so is bad because of the color of their skin, or their religion, or their other identities. And then living in Palestine for 4 years and seeing I was 14 years older than my little sister, so my younger sister and my younger brother, who was 8 years younger than I was, start to say hate, I hate, I hate, I hate, and to chant these unbearable chants. And so I came back and I wanted to understand what the psychology of hatred was. How do we reverse hatred? And so that's my passion, that's what I do, that's what I work for right now. How do we reverse hatred? How do we define where the oppression comes from, and how do we reverse it? How do you go back from that? When you have gone so far to dehumanize, to no longer see someone as a person, as just the same thing internally, like Sister Najah said, but to see them as something that's dehumanized, how do you go back from that? From the Trayvon Martins, from the Shema al-Wadis, where do you go from here? So I'm sorry if what I sort of talked a little bit about is kind of depressing, but that's what I do, and that's what I'm passionate about, and I love every day I go to work. Thank you.
That wasn't depressing at all. I felt uplifted after that. So thank you for sharing. Next, I'd like to invite Dr. Tabassum Ruby to the stage. Dr. Tabassum Ruby is a full-time faculty member in the Department of American Cultural Studies and Women's Studies and Sexuality Studies at Bowling Green State University. She received her PhD degree from York University in the Department of Women's Studies in June 2010. Her research interests include Islam and gender, secularism, modernity, colonialism, race and racism, and diasporic studies. Among others, she teaches courses on Islamic thought and the representations of Muslim women. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you very much, everyone, inviting me. I really feel honored and humbled to be here. I appreciate the way people have talked about. Really gives me hope and courage to keep thinking about Islam and gender issues. I started, I think, if I recall my memories about Islam and gender issues, when I was around 11 or 12 years old, and I started reading the Urdu translations of the Quran, because I don't know Arabic. I grew up in Pakistan, and Urdu is the national language, and that is the language that I started reading the Quranic translations of the Quran. And very quickly, I realized that the Quran speaks to men. And I also very quickly realized that it privileges men over women. So my young mind started to question, well, this book's supposed to be all about equality and justice. How do I understand that this book is not speaking to me, and it is giving privilege men over women? This is the earliest memory I can ever think of. How did I started, or how I started, or where my passion starts in terms of Islam and gender issues. Well, I kept learning. I got my master's degree in philosophy from Pakistan, and then I came to Canada. Here I changed my subject and I decided to go into women's studies. And taking classes in women's studies, it was also all about women's rights. And sitting in those classes, some of the things that I can recall was that, well, we talk about women's rights issues in the West, and some of the things that we will talk about, well, women got voting right to the 1920, property rights were given X year, and I keep thinking, well, I got those rights 1400 years ago. And these issues that you are talking about, they are not relevant to me per se. At the same time, then, we will also read many texts, many articles, many chapters. They will talk about Muslim women's oppression. They will talk about, for instance, honor killings. They will talk about genital mutilation. They will talk about wailing. They will talk about they are not allowed to go out. And then I started to feel, whenever those issues come up, I started to feel, well, I have to defend myself here. And most often, it was about defense. That, well, I would say, but no, but it is not, we cannot generalize, and then whatever I can come up, given that time and space, I will try to justify those things. But I knew that that justification is not enough. I knew that somehow I'm not addressing the issues at hand properly. And when I started to do my PhD, and then I have to pick my topic, and then I knew right from the beginning that I don't want to invest myself in something that is not relevant to myself. Therefore, I wanted to pick a topic that has a direct relevance to me. I didn't want to spend my time uselessly doing just academic work that has no relevance. So I picked the topic that, well, I still want to do. I did my master's research on the issue of hijabs, where I looked, conducted interviews. So that piece was done, but I wanted to broaden. I knew that I was missing something. It took me years over the period of doing my PhD that I realized that the missing piece that I always wanted to know was that it is the liberal secular framework, in which most often the issue of Muslim women's rights is addressed. And that framework is problematic. As long as I keep addressing Muslim women's issues within that framework, there is no way that I can address Muslim women's rights issues without taking a defensive position. And I didn't want to be apologetic, I didn't want to be offensive. I wanted to say, well, this is what Islam is, and you like it or not, this is where we stand. But in order to do this, and in the academy, the whole idea of academy is that it is secular space. So when you can critique religion in that particular secular space, but you cannot, well, you can, I have done this, I cannot say that you cannot. Nonetheless, it is very difficult that you take religion on the same platform that you take other forms of secular ideologies. So when I started doing this, one of the challenges that I encountered was that how do I then realized that in order to do so, I need to deconstruct liberal secular framework in order to say that there are ways to live our life, and they are equally valid, if not more so. In order to do so, Islam, what I see in the contemporary situation especially is, and I have lived through so many lives of my own life in that particular framework, that somehow we need to conform our life according to liberal secular ideologies. And outside of it, if you take any position, then either it is apologetic, it is offensive, it is oppressive, and the list goes on. So when I started doing my PhD, of course, I had to pick a particular case study that I needed to look at. During that period of time in Ontario, there was a debate going on regarding Sharia law debates, Ontario Sharia law debates, when a small group of Muslims, they put together this proposal that Muslims now can resolve their family disputes through Sharia laws. And then very quickly a global campaign was launched. That these are the women's rights organizations, human rights groups. They launched a global campaign against such a proposal because they said, well, then Muslim women's rights are going to be curtailed and we need to protect them. Of course, there is nothing new in those arguments because right from the colonial period, we see that Muslim women, the white man's burden, that they are always there to help us the whole idea that the Muslim woman is oppressed and therefore we need to liberate her and rescue her. There was nothing new about those ideas in those debates, but I was interested. Why, since the colonial period, we keep hearing those arguments, and what is the framework in which those arguments actually make sense to larger people? And that's why I wanted to turn the tables around. Rather than looking at how Islam oppresses women, I wanted to look at how liberal secular framework is problematic. What are some of the flaws in the liberal secular framework? What are its limitations? And why it is a racist discourse to imply liberal secular hegemonies on Muslim women and then say that you can be liberated as long as we come and rescue you within that particular framework. And the human rights framework is very much part of that framework, that, well, it is our human rights issue that we need, if women are oppressed, that we need to go and liberate them. So I looked at that particular framework. So let's in order to give you some specific example, I like to share with you how human rights language is problematic and what is a difference between an Islamic epistemology, that what we know and how we know, and ontology, what is our orientation, what is our reference point that we can start our life. So the critics' main argument was that the Sharia tribunals, they insisted that the Canada should maintain the church-state separation. And Muslim women's right should be, should imply Canadian civil laws in order to assure Muslim women's rights. And it was built on this premise that Sharia laws, they don't embody gender equality. And therefore, if we imply Sharia laws in Ontario, Muslim women's rights will be curtailed. So it was not, interestingly enough, that only non-Muslims campaigned against Sharia laws, but it was a campaign mainly led by Muslims themselves. And those Muslims, including and one of the leading organization was the Canadian Council of Muslim Women, who identified themselves as the believing women. So within that framework, this is what they say, that, well, we are as believing women, we feel that Muslim women's rights will be curtailed if we imply Sharia laws. Therefore, we need to have the secular framework in order to assure women's rights. And it is interesting to read, for instance, I am going to read their position statement. And in this, Canadian Council of Muslim Women said, and I read, the Council holds that human rights as declared in the United Nations Universal Declaration are consistent with the ideas of Islam. And as believing women, we can adhere to the Quran and to the UN Declaration. We see no contradictions between the rights and responsibilities as expressed in the divine message and those articulated by the nations of the world. As Canadian Muslim women, we uphold the Charters of Rights and Freedoms and expect it to apply to us as fully as any other Canadian. The Council sees no compelling reason to live under any other form of law in Canada, as we want the same laws to apply to us as to other Canadian women. We like the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which safeguard and protect our equality rights. We know that the values of compassion, social justice, and human rights, including equality, are the common basis of Islam and Canadian law. Now, what is problematic? And most often, many women's rights issues are brought within that framework that this is the human rights and this is the equality framework that we need to adhere. I want to highlight a couple of points what is being problematic here. So in this expert, the Council states that both the Declaration of Human Rights and Islamic ideals are premised on the values of compassion, social justice, and equality, and that there is no contradiction between them. Because of this, as Canadian Muslim women, they uphold the Charters of Rights and Freedom and expect it to apply to them as fully as to any other Canadian. Yet if there is no difference between rights discourse and Islam, then why does the Council wish to apply the former set of laws and not the latter? Further, this statement is contradictory to the critics' fundamental arguments. They have consistently argued that religious laws should not be employed to resolve family dispute because most faiths, and I quote them again, whether we like it or not, are not fair to women because they are based on patriarchal traditions. Thus, to assert that the Declaration is consistent with the ideals of Islam not only signals that the Council's commitment to rights discourse is stronger than its commitment to Islam, but also points to its contradictory views. Leaving aside these issues, it may be true that both rights discourse and Islam seeks to cultivate passion, social justice, equality. Nonetheless, their points of references are different, both ontologically and epistemologically. Because as Islamic orientation is embedded in the transcendental consciousness in contrast to rights discourse, for instance. If we discuss, I quote here Bazzy, who argued that the Human Rights Declaration, and specifically the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, the development of those documents apparently did not and does not consider the Islamic concept of human existence, purpose, and rights and responsibility. She argues that the whole concept of universal organization is by itself an indication that human beings and human relations are viewed within the philosophy of the secular nation-state concept. And by this, they assume that the state is separate from the mandate of human functions and the political governing, the underlying Judeo-Christian philosophy that its aspects are built within this notion that the church-state separation is the guiding principle of these documents. And what Bazzy is arguing is that the human rights discourse rests on secular principles and endorses the separation of church and state. In contrast, the Tawhidi worldview, that is the oneness of God, that is the primary concept of Islam, on which Islam is premised, neither can accept guidance outside of the signs of God, that is that I read here ayats, none can support separation of church and state because such an act replaces God's supremacy over human supremacy, because then human beings becomes the agent of regulating human behavior as opposed to the divine message. So once we are in that realm where human beings become the legislator of their own rules, they are the one who are the driving force and they think what is right and what is wrong, then we are standing on two different planes. And this is the guiding principle of the Declaration of Human Rights. As Muslims, we cannot just accept that fundamental difference and then say that Islam also cultivates passion, justice, and equality, therefore just accept that. Those concepts might be the same. It is not to argue that they are aliens for Islam. Nonetheless, their starting point is different and their guiding principles are different. And this is the key element that everyone who says that taken Shahada, that make that covenant with God that now, from now on, I'm going to conduct my social relations within the guiding principle of Islam, cannot just dismiss that and then say that I can accept human reason, human logic as the sole principle of guiding social relations. And this is the key reference point, the orientation, the ontological difference that I want to point out. And the second point that I want to raise here is that is also connected to the ontological point. Standpoint is the epistemological standpoint. What is my guiding source here? The source of knowledge production. So there are not only the ontological, the orientation, that where do I go as a reference point. That is the main difference between the Declaration of Human Rights and Islam, but also the epistemological one, that what is my source of knowledge. So, and there is a stark contrast between Islamic knowledge production and secular liberal knowledge production. And I quote here one of the scholars, one of the scholars who mentions that the limits of human reason, and Kamali says that the Quran commentators understand thinking as pondering and reflection, which is a mental activity and a process, not an outcome. Thinking is considered as a form of ibadah, that is the worship God, if it is done with good purpose. And the human intellect, in its Quranic conception, is also one that conceives the truth that it is always in search of it. So from this standpoint, according to the Tawhidi, that is the oneness of God worldview, engaging in knowledge production, reading God's signs is a form of serving God, and reason is not posed in opposition to faith in divine truths, but in fact, it is a mean to reach it. In other words, unlike the Enlightenment or secular ideals, reason is one of the mechanisms, like the hearing and the seeing, to reach the transcendent knowledge, and it does not generate knowledge independently. This is because human or intellect is engaging with God's signs, God's ayats, and these signs are neither created by people, nor does their existence depend on them. More precisely, the Tawhidi worldview does not bestow the primacy of reason over the revelation, that is Wahi. This would be properly known as rationalism. This is different from rationality, which means treating any issues by using reason without giving reason priority. The idea of rationalism versus rationality then implies that the supreme source of knowledge is Wahi, that is the revelation. Not rational thought. The purpose of engaging in rational activity is to reach out to transcendental knowledge, and hence reason alone is insufficient to generate knowledge for the political and moral conduct of human relations. Therefore, when the critics of Ontario Sharia tribunals assert that we want Canadian secular law and we must separate religion from the state, they overlook the significant difference between Islamic and secular epistemology. This short-sightedness undermines and in fact dismisses the Tawhidi worldview. It also is an act of domination, as it constitutes knowledge in a hierarchical manner, since greater power is attached to secular knowledge production in contrast to religious knowledge production. Further, since the critics of Ontario Sharia tribunals have insisted that religion is a private matter and Canada should maintain the separation of church and state, this stance is no different than to assert that white is the superior race and white middle-class Western values are the necessarily best way of living. In the final analysis then, to oblige Muslims to comply with liberal secular ideals is another example of colonial and imperial rules. So I stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Ruby. I feel like I definitely learned a lot about Western framework and academia. So at this point, I'd like to invite the panelists to join us up here, and I'll be posing a couple questions, and we'll just have an informal conversation. So please join me in welcoming them. To thank all of you for being here. I think we had such a diverse and unique perspective from each of you, so thank you so much. So first question I have is, so all of you mentioned this conflict, this what people make out to seem this inherent conflict between being Muslim and being American. Dr. Ruby talked about the liberal secular framework and how that impacts Muslim Americans. Sister Najah Bazzy talked about the scoops of ice cream and intersecting identities. So, and Noor Ali, you mentioned tokenism and growing up in Rockford, Illinois. So what do you think is the best way for Muslim Americans of my generation to negotiate this? What would be the best way to have our Muslim identity be salient to us and not feel like it's in conflict with our Americanness? So anyone can answer.
Looking at me like I'm supposed to answer. So I want to start by clarifying what we mean by American, and I think that we mean U.S. citizens, so I want to clarify that because I think that saying American can be oppressive to a lot of people. But as a U.S. citizen, I think one thing I've learned time and time again is that there's no definition of what it means to be a citizen. We're all so unique and in our own ways. And so really defining that or to give like this, golden piece of advice is really difficult. What's held true for me is to be really true to myself and first and foremost, can you not hear me? Yeah. Sorry. So should I just take this out? So what's been true for me is to, I think Sister Najah said this, like being Muslim, my faith, and for me, that's the only way that I found like serenity is to be led by my faith, and that really being Muslim is not nationalistic, it's not gendered, it's not in any way for any specific race. It's very much something that's supposed to encompass all of our identities. And although I spoke about being really honest and true and realistic about where I hold power and privilege, I think that first and foremost I am Muslim, and my faith drives my work and drives my passion and pushes me forward. So all I would say to your generation and to future generations is really look within your heart, there's a verse in the Quran that says, Allah yahdi man yasha wa man yahdi man yasha. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or God, brings forth to Islam who He loves, and doesn't take those who aren't meant for it. So it's in some ways that's a totally bad translation, but in some ways really that you're meant to be here. You're meant to have these thoughts. You're meant to be driven. So follow your heart, and God will lead the way.
Sure. Thank you, Noor.
Yeah, I'm in a battle with the microphone.
You have to twist it.
I may break it before it comes out. I think, I'm not one who has this conflict. I don't know what it is or why it is. But to me, there's no conflict about being Muslim in America. And in fact, I think what Islam has to offer America is so valuable. And I believe it's time for Muslims to just come forward and be who you are. And I really say that from the bottom of my heart. I don't see conflict between my Americanness and my Muslimness, or whatever those terms, correct terms are. I don't know if it's because this is the only land I've ever lived in, if it's because I've grown up appreciating these complementary identities, but I've not been one who's ever seen them in conflict. And it could be just that I'm too simple-minded. It could be that. Because things like, and I say this often in my lectures around the country, around the world, you know, America doesn't have a problem with people taking their clothes off, so why do you have a problem with people keeping their clothes on? It's that simple, because in this country you can say that and you can feel that and you can be that. I don't have a problem with being in hijab. I do call America to a point in time where what's in my head is as important as what's on my head. I do call America to that, but as a Muslim and as an American, I have the right to make that call. That's my right in this country. And so to me, and this may sound a little offensive, and I don't mean it to be. Wallahi, right hand to God, don't mean it to be. I believe that the Muslim American identity is so powerful that it could be the change agents in the world for better. If you live your faith the right way, you are the best Muslim, you are the best American. And no one has the right in this country to rob you of that identity. So you stand up and you be who you are, and you be proud of who you are. No compromise, there's no need.
You all mentioned in your lecture of social justice, equality, and how that's so inherent to Islam. So in your work, how is religion tied into what you do? And I think you all talked about it or alluded to this. So what do you really think is the relationship between social justice, being agents of change, as Sister Najah was saying, and Islam?
So, as Muslims, we are taught that God has one attribute that has to be in place. And if this attribute is not in place, then there is a faltering system. And that is God's justice. God is all just, and He is fair. And so for, I think, one who loves God, or who sees themselves as one in this world who should serve this Lord, then I think that the call is to that human equity and to that justice. If I believed that God created man to be better than woman, I probably would not be Muslim. I don't see that in my faith, no matter what Fox News wants to tell me about it, it's unacceptable. So for me, it's about God's justice, and God's justice permeates, I hope, everything else that I touch or that I do. But to me, sometimes it's hard to deal with me because my sense of justice is so strong that sometimes I can't compromise on certain things. And sometimes it makes that a little difficult too as well. I'm not so flexible when it comes to certain things. Like I have these lines. You don't cross that line with me, and if you cross that line with me, then I'm going to be called to take a different road. It's just, and sometimes it is problematic for me, but that's really, I think, what permeates the work.
Thank you.
You were asking it of everyone, weren't you?
Yes.
Do you want?
Yes, anyone can answer.
But somehow I think that I never left academy because I finished my PhD and then I came back as a teacher. So my life is started by academy and school. So I apologize if this is not what you were expecting to hear from me. But I want to draw on my teaching movements that I call quite frustrated movements. Well, it is not very long that I heard these comments about Muslims, including that, well, the fact is that we don't feel safe around Muslims. I'm not sure if my students know that I'm a Muslim, and in some ways I do think they know them, despite the fact they make those kinds of racist comments and Islamophobic comments. There is a consistent, and I do these kinds of activities in my classrooms. For instance, I would ask them, if we are discussing Muslim women, that what comes to your mind, and not surprisingly, I get that list, oppressed, covered head to toe, foreign men, restricted, have no freedom, no rights. While these things, they don't surprise me anymore. But surprise, well, I don't think that it surprises me. Nonetheless, what worries me, in a way, is that to the extent the media has brainwashed their minds. And it's very difficult to deconstruct those ideas. It doesn't matter what movie you show them, what documentary you show them, what literature you ask them to read, what arguments you make. The next week you see them and you start discussing, and then you feel like they are on the same track that the very first day that they came here. Nothing is sinking. And why it is not sinking, and this is the problem that I encounter as a teacher all the time in classroom, and I see the pattern because I see most of the classes that I teach, they are all around teaching racism and sexism in our societies. And I see the pattern, that the same pattern is applied to Muslim women. Well, blacks are historically constructed in a certain ways, and those things, they come back in one way or another in classroom, and students end up making those racist comments, or somehow it doesn't sink. Even though we have learned that certain language is not okay, but I can read where they are coming from. So but there is no easy solution here, Annie, that you are asking here, what can we do? But I see media as a powerful machine. And I see media as a powerful propaganda machine. I'm not sure that Muslims are equipped enough, or they do have those tools where they can deconstruct those ideas. And I see those young people, that the hate that you mentioned, and I've been thinking since my last class that maybe I need to introduce some literature around fear, because I think the media really has created this myth of fear. We created this myth around black masculinity too, that this is something that you should be mindful of, scared. You need to watch yourself. And now the same myth has been created around Muslims, that you need to watch yourself. They are the ones who are the terrorists. And because this image has been constructed so many times over time, I simply don't know where to go with that. At times I feel helpless, and where I don't think that Muslims have enough tools to deconstruct what our politicians and our media already have constructed. And I see those young people in my classrooms. Imagine if they are 20 years old, more than half of their life has gone into this 9/11 rhetoric, where they have seen only one particular narrative of the Muslims and about Muslim women. And it is very difficult to deconstruct that. I'm not sure how long it is going to take. We can only take small steps. But this is where I stand. I don't have a neat answer to that.
Do you mind if I?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead. Thank you,
So
Dr.
I want to start by saying I'm so not used to talking at people, so I'm really sorry. But the work I do, I mean, again, I studied social work, so a lot of times I get the question like, why didn't you become a doctor? Or like, you should have gone and become a pharmacist, or one of these like, fancy professions, and social work doesn't really get paid very well. So, and I say, well, as a Muslim, we are supposed to do social workers, and I get to be paid to do my religious duties, basically, and I'm really lucky to do that. And in the question of social justice and being change agents, I feel like I'm right smack in the middle, not just physically, but also mentally, between Dr. Ruby and Sister Najah, and I feel like on this end, I was like, oh, but then, you know, I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe wearing a hijab. I'm going to wear it because that's my struggle. That's my jihad. To wear it and to, you know, proclaim my religious duty and to proclaim my pride in being part of this wonderful faith and being part of this wonderful community. But I don't feel safe because last week, you know, a mother of 5 was beaten to death because she was, you know, who knows why, you know, but she was basically beaten to death because she's seen as a foreigner and as a threat. And many times I know that I'm seen as a threat and I have to go to the airport and smile at people and wonder, why the hell do I have to smile at you? Excuse my language. Why? Why do I have to smile at you when you don't have to smile back at me, but just to make you feel safe, I have to smile. And you know what? Then I don't want to smile, but then it's like I get extra points for smiling. So smile is sadaqah, right? So I'll smile. I'll go on and smile. But, you know, on the same end, I hear Dr. Ruby and I'm like, well, I tell my facilitators all the time, we plant the seed. You're not going to see change overnight, but I hope and I pray that you can plant the seed. And maybe that's in modeling good behavior, modeling the light that is in you from your faith, from your morals, from your ethics, and maybe it's because you talk about it, or maybe it's because you say something enlightening, and maybe you're just you. But you plant the seed, and you don't see it. Dr. Ruby, you may not see it, you know, in your class now, but a year from now, or 10 years from now, I promise you that seed will germinate, so just have faith. And that's how I go on.
I smile with you, of course.
You smile too.
Thank you for reminding me, because when I share my frustrations with my colleagues and my friends, they tell me the same thing. But you don't know at one time, maybe it clicks to them later on in their lives. And we do hear, as teachers, we do hear that students coming back after years. But now I understood why you were saying this in class. So I do need to remind myself that there is a hope.
I would like to just add something here. I know it's very acceptable to feel victimized. I get that piece. But that's also a choice. And so I would caution us. I think I get a little frustrated when Muslims we do feel oppressed. I get that. I feel that there is a tension, undoubtedly. We're beating the war drum, so somebody has to be an enemy here, and it's our turn. Right, wrong, or indifferent, it is what it is. I do have to smile extra when I'm in the airports, and I do. I even did a New York Times article about this, that walking down the aisle in the airplane makes you feel like, oh my gosh, you know, you're just feeling like everybody's looking at you like, is she the one? You know, she has something in her shoe, she has something in her scarf, you know, and so I do smile to the point where I say, I want them to see my smile and not my scarf, because if I don't smile, they're going to only see my scarf. But I often wonder where Muslims are and why we're not often standing up for the rights of others. And that's my call in this country. Yes, if you're walking in the shoes of those who are oppressed, then you better make sure that you're also standing up for those who are oppressed. Our turn this time, somebody else's turn next time. And that's one thing that I think we don't do enough of. And I think I have to say that, honestly, it bothers me.
Thank you. This is a question for Noor. You talked about, and this is related to what Sister Najah just said, of how consciousness raising is so integral to us being Muslims. Consciousness raising our consciousness about our privilege, and you know, it's related to what Sister Najah was saying, that we need to be mindful of how we can oppress others. How do you think our generation can negotiate this, even if we don't understand all the concepts behind, you know, these institutions at play?
So it's a constant struggle, right? Really being critical of who you are and the different identities that you hold. Simply coming to the idea of understanding what identities you hold. What are social identities? So gender, religion, socioeconomic status, your race and ethnicity, all these things, they come into play and they intersect in really interesting ways. And so you're neither oppressed nor are you privileged. You are a culmination of all these things, which we call intersectionality, right? And so it was difficult for me to come to terms with the fact, after having lived in Palestine for 4 years, and just having that oppression at the forefront of my mind, and then coming to a post 9/11 world and having the Muslim oppression in the forefront of my mind, to realize I've got a lot of privilege socioeconomically. I've never had to, and alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I've never had to worry about what we're going to eat, or if I can buy that shirt I really like, or dress to impress, I guess. And that's a huge privilege, and I was put to shame when I had to realize that and understand that in that privilege, I oppress others, because there are judgments, and through that lens that I have, it's just a tainted world. It's just and so think about, what I would challenge everyone to do is think about the things that you probably never had to think about before. So if you have probably never had to think about whether or not to wear a skirt or a dress, or pants, or if your pants are too tight, you're probably a man. That's privilege. If you have never had to think about if you can take the trip to Chicago or not, you probably have privilege socioeconomically. If you have never had to think about if someone was going to be afraid of you walking at night, you might be white, or you might hold some white privilege, even if you're Arab, or even if you may have light skin and hold some privilege there. But understand that you may also be a person of color. So all these things intersect with one another, and it's a very difficult slope to go down, but it is very important, I think, to really, really begin to critically think, and that's, I'm warning you, it's very, very painful. In IGR, we say we mess people up in a good way, because all of a sudden you realize that you realize that ignorance was really bliss, and it was really great not to know that you suck, but you do. And so now you have a responsibility to make it something change and make it work somehow. So good luck. I'm right above Starbucks on South U, so just let me know if you want to chat about it.
Thank you, Noor. So this is the last question from me, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Sister Najah, you said this in your speech. It was really riveting point to me. You said, God is a feminist. And I read this tweet the other day that says, Islam makes me a better feminist, and feminism makes me a better Muslim. So I'm interested in hearing all three of the panelists respond to this, and if Sister Najah could speak a little more about what you meant by God as a feminist.
I struggle with this word, probably because I'm from the 1960s. See, again, am I just getting old, or what's happening here with me? It could be that I'm just getting old. I am turning 52 this next month, so it could be that. For me, God is an equal opportunity creator. For me, God is an equal opportunity creator. And because I see God as an equal opportunity creator, and because the way that I see my faith, and I have studied Islam thoroughly. I'm not a PhD in Islamic studies, but I have taken the time and I have studied with multiple scholars, female and male. I think the West had a feminist movement. This is very touchy, because the Christian principles that our country here was built on, God was a man. And so in the Trinity, he's a man. And so if your Lord, with all due respect, is a man that you can physically see, then as a female, I would definitely feel like my rights were less. So one of the things I love about Islam is that if God had a son, because of his justice, he would have also have had to have a daughter. And so I for me, love this faith because I'm able to embrace Jesus and Moses and the prophets and messengers of God as his servants. And so I often feel that it's just white masculinity and the white man's game, and even to the point where we had to color Jesus with blonde hair, blue eyes. We know he didn't have that. That whole level of superiority is what's messed women up in the West, and that's why that led to a feminist movement. My Islam has taught me that I am equal to the male counterpart, and that's God's equity. And so I love that I didn't have to fight to vote, and that I don't have to fight for my rights. He's given them to me, God has given them to me, and it's just, that's what it is for me. It's about a fair playing field. That's why I say that. Did I say God is a feminist? Because sometimes I do say that, but did I say that tonight?
Yes.
See, it just comes out naturally. Long answer, because I wasn't expecting that question, so I had to really think about it.
No, I understand. I just thought it was an interesting point, so I'd like to thank you.
I mean no disrespect, please.
But I don't think I use that one, so I don't need to justify that. But I do want to respond to this. In my work, the way I refer, because I do refer back always in my work to Quranic verses. And in order to, and of course in Islam we use the pronouns he. And then I always have a footnote where whenever I use that word, that according to the Islamic faith, God is neither he nor she. In fact, you will be outside of the Islamic parameter if you consider God as either he or she, and then I refer back to Surah Ikhlas, that these are the attributes, this is how we're supposed to conceptualize. And it is a linguistic problem that I am using here the word he, as well as one reason is that in the Quran God does reference back to the pronouns he. Now we can have many tafsirs about that, why it is this, but the main message that we get always is, and as a Muslim, that's the basic rule, that God is neither he nor she. And if I attribute, and then I always refer back to that, but as Muslim, we also have these 99 names of Allah, and they have different characteristics. Some are feminine, some are masculine, and this is how we recognize. And one of the good things about women's studies is that there is always this trouble, and feminists always take this trouble deconstructing the binary thinking, because one of the ways that feminists try to understand equality is that, or what they have identified, one of the ways we have constituted gender inequality is that we think along binary thinking. Either we are male or female, night, day, everything is opposition, and somehow then we also rank those binaries, that we attribute different ranking to male and we attribute different ranking to female. So one of the things that advantage that I get working within women's studies is that then I am giving them a language that it is possible to go beyond to those binary thinkings, and actually Islam is premised on those things, that well, if we need to deconstruct those binary thinkings. So this is how I use God.
Thank you, Dr. Ruby. Or would you like to comment on the question?
I'll add one last thing, and that's my husband always tells me, Noor, Islam is not about equality, it's about fairness. And when you think of men and women, you can't compare apples with oranges. And I always think about that, and I'm not really sure what it means, but I thought I'd share that with everyone, and it's something to really ponder. Like, we strive, and I think, I have to say I don't know enough about, I guess I have my own perception of feminism, and I think that in many ways I'm seen in my community as a feminist for Muslim women, but I've often seen also feminists who, and there is like the second wave and the first wave and the third wave and who knows, but I often have seen like feminists who are trying really hard to have all the rights that men have and be almost like have no difference, but there is difference, and I have always felt really comfortable to recognize that difference. So in terms of God being a feminist, if that, what I understood that to mean when Sister Najah said that, the way that it resonated with me was that God has given us rights, and I don't need, again, like she said, I guess, I don't need a movement to give me those rights because I feel very free. And the nuances, because I know some of you in there are thinking, well, Islam doesn't really like give many rights, or there are some oppressive things in Islam. Well, I think that there's a confusion many times between the Muslim community or Muslims and Islam. And Islam is, in my opinion and in my heart, perfect. And I think that the way that it's practiced is very is oppressive in many ways. And what's really unique and what makes me so proud to be Muslim, and I say this all the time, is that I have a personal relationship with Allah. I don't have to go to a scholar, and I don't have to go to a religious leader to confess my sins. With all due respect to those who do that, I don't have to do that. I can look up and pray, and I can speak to God all by myself. And so I have the book, the Quran, and I have the Sunnah, the sayings and the doings of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and then I have a brain that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed me with, and I can make those decisions for myself, and that's how I practice my day-to-day life.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to open it up to the audience for Q&A. If you'd like to stand and share your question, or I think there might be no cards on the tables, but I'm not sure about that. So the floor is open. Who's here?
So, Jazakallah khairan. I want to thank all three of you. I actually didn't see any real separation between what the three of you are saying. And just seeing the three of you, I think, is hope that this type of perception or misperception is being challenged. Whether it is Sister Najah, who I really feel doesn't feel the stigmatization, because it seems like you very much express what it means to be a Muslim American, therefore you don't feel any of that upon yourself. And I think that that's something beautiful, and I think that's something that a lot of us are trying to work towards. And then Sister Noor Ali, I think the very fact that you are fighting kind of this oppressive system that I think is institutionalized, not just here, but worldwide, I think is a means in and of itself of responding to it. And Dr. Tabassum, who I was, very, very pleased to listen to in our kind of intellectual conversations that we have on campus, is exactly the issue that we're always talking about, the framework issue, about how to know where we're even going back to. And I really think that the three of you in your three different distinct roles in what you do in your day-to-day lives are an expression of how to combat both the prejudice that Muslims feel and women feel, but I think it's also a way of Muslim women speaking back into the Muslim audience and the non-Muslim audience. And what I wanted to ask after that kind of long-winded thank you, I wanted to ask is how can Muslim women in America contribute their voices in a way that can be heard more loudly within the Muslim spirit? Because although I definitely agree that God on high didn't mean to oppress women and didn't oppress women, I think men often do.
Thank you, Tasleem.
So I'll start just because I have some burning thoughts. And although we have stood up here, or I have stood up here and I have said, Muslim woman, as a Muslim, I'm not oppressed, that doesn't mean as a woman I'm not oppressed. So I want to make that loud and clear. Whether I am white, black, Asian American, US citizen, or Palestinian citizen, as a woman I'm oppressed. And so I think that doesn't change that. And so in my opinion, and in the work that I do, it starts with understanding where my oppression comes from and that I am oppressed, but to understand that I have agency in that role, in that identity, and in taking back that right. But it also takes Muslim men to understand the privilege that they hold and that they really have no right to hold that privilege, and that I'm not waiting for men to open up that door for me, because then I might stand waiting forever. But I do feel like it is important that we recognize these roles that we do hold. Islam hasn't given us that privilege or oppression. We as human beings have created that, and it's important to begin to unpack that in our communities. It's a very, very, in my opinion, a very difficult task to take on.
I share your thoughts. You know, I keep talking about cultural bondage, not Islamic bondage. And, you know, I do end-of-life work. I did open heart surgery, but most of what I do is end-of-life work. And, you know, when you're with people who are taking their last breath all of the time, one of the things that it does to you, and many of you who are in medicine, you'll be in that role, one of the things it does to you is it gives you the sense that, especially for Muslims and other faith traditions as well, the return back is what's important. So when you said that, maybe like I'm fully embraced my Muslim Americanness or my American Muslimness, it's because I know my road. It's because if I am going to worry about what every single person in this room thinks about me, the standard is so different and so varied that I will never be able to meet all of your expectations. Once I fully realized that, which was a challenge as a woman growing up, because, you know, it was that aim to please all of the time, being the pleasing person all the time. Once I realized that what was important to me is if I'm pleasing God, and then through that, I could be pleasing to others, that would be fine. But to try to be pleasing to the plateau of humanity first, and then be pleasing to God second, I just can't keep up. And I found that it's much easier to please God than it is to please humanity and to please man. And so, having that thought, I believe that the cultural bondage is what's going to stop Muslim women in this country from making their mark. And I expect someone like you, Taysir, to be opening those doors. Muslim women, you cannot settle for a small room in your masjids when your brothers have a full space. That is not what God wants for you. I guarantee you that. You should not settle for a dirty, unclean place. You're relegated or renegated or whatever that word is into small spaces while others are in wide open spaces. At the very least, you should be lobbying for at least equity, at least a little bit of equity. And I think that that's going to change as leadership changes. I also feel that we have to engage. We have to engage. Muslim women need to engage their societies, and I see that happening everywhere. But you have so much to give. And you know, I see the landscape changing. I mean, Muslim women are everywhere now. They're at the hockey games, and they're in the stands, and they're the soccer people. They're everywhere. Where are they not? And so I think as they enjoy their freedoms in America, I guess what I would say, I don't know how to put it, but if you have these freedoms in America and you enjoy them, and then you go to your mosque or your community and they're taken away from you, then something that has to be addressed. And that cannot be acceptable. Now, of course, I'm Lebanese. So the Lebanese community, women enjoy all types of freedoms. We're not really so culturally stuck. There isn't so much segregation because it's a very social type society, to be quite honest with you. So I probably in Dearborn, I don't have the issues that many other Muslim women may have around the country, and I acknowledge that I don't really have those issues. I have imams calling me for opinions. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? How should we do this? How should we do that? They've taken women in many ways as partners in some of the decision making, as well they should. So I don't have a good answer to that, but I think we need to work a little bit harder to have voice.
Around this mosque issue, this is one of the issues that I always talk to my brother. But this is not acceptable. While when I go, I ended up having such a small space, and you ended up praying downstairs in the main hall. It is not acceptable. So there are some talks around building new mosque as a modern mosque where women can have similar space. So I see it as a positive sign with the Muslim community that I talk to. And I like to share another thing, very small experience, but I do think that these small experiences, then they do have larger impact. A few years ago, my brother got married and my sister-in-law came here, and I was visiting them at the kitchen table. She said to me that Asif was saying that you have changed your name and you still carry your father's name. So I'm thinking I better change my name, last name. I looked at and I said, but that's very un-Islamic. Islamically, it is not what Muslim women are supposed to do. And I said, well, you need to do a little bit of research and you need to convince your husband on this. And it did work. And that issue never came back. The point is that these are small things, but then they add up. If we are educated enough and know about what is Islam all about, then we can teach our men too. Perhaps they can have then desire, I might not be saying these things in the first place because they are not Islamic to start with. So this is where I see hope.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions, comments, or thoughts?
I work from a transcultural framework, and at the end of the framework, you come out with accommodate, negotiate, repattern. And these have become things that are very internalized to me. So I teach them in med schools, I teach them all around the country, I teach them wherever I go, social workers, nurses, everyone. Regarding domestic violence and things, I think that sometimes it's the approach that's not correct. So I've been able to make inroads with people for domestic violence where others really can't make the inroads. And I think it's because I'm not coming at it from a feminist perspective, I'm coming at it from a human perspective. Nobody deserves to get slapped. Nobody, male or female, deserves to be beaten. It's wrong. And it's my Islam that teaches me it's wrong. And so when I come at that particular subject, I come at it and I say, look, you know, if you can withstand your mother being beaten or your sister being beaten, or these things, you know, then I guess you would be okay with it for others. But since you don't accept that for people who you love and women that you love, then how is it that you can accept it for others? You can't do that. The other thing that I've called people to is, especially in the past couple of years, we've had women who've been murdered from domestic violence, not just beaten, they have been killed. And the cost of that on our human consciousness is so bad that I've said to people, look, you have a choice. You either stop it now or you're going to carry the sin of the death of this person. Which one do you want? If you're okay having their death on your conscience, say nothing. But if you're not okay having their death on your conscience, you better get involved in saying something and helping me to come up with a plan of action. That's one of our primary programs at Zaman International. But I do that because I've learned to accommodate the different cultural groups that I'm working with, including the culture of imams, the culture of decision makers, the culture of the gatekeepers of the community, and I've learned to negotiate certain things, like giving them a higher consciousness that they have to move to. And then the repatterning piece is actually when we actually get something done, when we actually have a program in place, when I hear the imams talking about it on the microphones and not sanctioning that it's okay. So I think a lot of it is an approach. And another thing that I've learned, I will tell you, is what is domestic violence here in the West is very different than what domestic violence might be for women of other cultures. There's a lot of differences with that, and some of you probably know that. So a shove or, something, here could be considered domestic violence, but for most people who I counsel or have to advocate for, I wish it was a shove or a push. It's a lot more severe than that.
Thank you.
I think everybody's hungry.
I think so too. That's a really good segue. First off, I want to thank Sister Najah Bazzy, Sister Noor Ali, and Dr. Ruby for being so candid. I've learned a lot today from you three. I appreciate your insights and words of wisdom. So let's all give them a big round of applause. So this is the part where people said they were hungry, so this is the part that works. So we have refreshments right over there, but the night is not over. After the refreshments, there will be 3 Muslim women, very talented. I'm very excited to introduce them, who will be doing spoken word performances, so please stick around. And also, it is Maghrib prayer, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's after the sun sets. We will be praying downstairs in room 4 in the league, if you'd like to join us for that. Yes, thank you. Is Hind Omar, a first-generation Palestinian American who was born and raised in the Ann Arbor area. She's a senior at Community High School and has been writing for 4 years. She uses her identity to better understand. She uses her writing to better understand different sectors of her identity and to connect with others. Please join me in welcoming Hind.
Like she said, I was born and raised in Ann Arbor, but I have immigrant parents. So my mother was a history teacher in the Bled. We immigrated from Palestine, and she was a history teacher. And she came here and she became a nurse, but she was a history teacher there. So I have always taken history classes in public schools, and I'd always get the narrative from my history classes, and I'd go home and I'd get a completely different narrative from my mother. Right? So I wrote this first poem in response to my frustration sitting in a all-white public school classroom learning about someone else's history. In history class, we are taught that in order to truly find ourselves, we must read. So we open books, assuming the personal narrative of our existence is somewhere embedded in between the ink-stained pages. We open books to acquire knowledge of how the earth revolved before we were the ones spinning it. We open books, hoping to find the reflection of our world staring back at us. covers teach us hard lessons. Black words on white pages seem more like white words on white pages. So come on in, class. Take your seats. My name is Miss America, and I'm here to teach. Open your books to 1830. See the trail of tears weep of battered wounds. A people stripped of ceremonial practices, eagle feather headdress, blissful yesterdays, all in search of someone else's manifest destiny. Flip over to 1942. Executive Order 9066 swept across a land of civil liberties, plundering and branding a people like cattle. Internment lasted for 4, but it took 46 to apologize for injustice. Now turn to 9/11. The day brown eyes became affirmation for terrorism. Olive-tinted skin embodies destruction, and funny-sounding accents symbolize unpatriotism. They all look the same wrapped in a kofiyah, so we wrap racism in a bow and call it the Patriot Act. As Americans, we are born with rights and liberties. No one tells us hyphenation really is a string attached. So this is for the Chippewa, the Navajo, the Cherokee, for Yanaha, Sunoco, and Tamiki, for Syria, Masr, Iraq, and Lebanon, for Palestine, Gaza, and Bahrain kaman. Take these colored pens. Let multicolored ink spill out your stories, and make white pages speak truth. So, growing up, I've always learned of Palestine in terms of violence, right? Everyone refers to it as a violent zone, a very violent region in the world, right? And I have my own connection to Palestine. So I wrote this next poem to bring back the humanity and remind everyone that there's still beauty and humanity in such horrific, inhumane things. I know a place where the warm breeze kisses my cheeks so angelically, inhaling all of me into it. A place where the soil is softer than any cloud I have ever dreamt of. A place where 10-year-old boys playing soccer in the streets exchange curse words with every kick. Where every Saturday night is a celebration. Shabab and Sabaya gather in the village square, join hands and step, step, kick. They are doing the dance of revolt with intertwined yallas and aywas, and with every stomp, small pebbles dance up into the air, and nothing else matters, just being there. Just thankful they lived through the week to be together that night. A place where grandparents pride themselves in passing down stories of their realities in a way textbooks never could. Where I can walk down any city street, see the falafel stand right next to the fruit vendor, right across the street from the elderly man pushing the ice cream cart yelling, "Booza, booza, 2 shekels." A place where my eyes caress every curve and dot of every letter on every page. All the while Mahmoud Darwish and Edward Said depict to me their every conception and philosophy of our people's misery. Sajjal and Arabi. Where Fairuz serenades me with her metaphoric love affair with our land. Her universal voice echoes across borders, reaching those whom politicians never could. But there are nights when the sound of rubber bullets hit, stone, brick, flesh, becoming the soundtrack of a village playing on through the night, where the tears of mourning mothers swell the Mediterranean, where there is an abundance of overpaid politicians and underfed children, where expanding a home is not possible, but expanding a family is, and where the 64 years of the world's silence are deafening. But I can never hate you, nor can I ever fear you, someone so much like me, young Israeli soldier. Because we fight for this, and we believe in him, and the rifle separating you from me is not strong enough to kill this undying love I have for you. I take your hand and we blend because our olive skin is embedded with the same struggle. Our rich colored eyes are darker than any history we have ever shared, and our thick, coarse hair strands back centuries. So I can never hate you, nor can I ever fear you. I love you. Thank you.
Wow, I'm thoroughly impressed. And she's still in high school, y'all. In high school. That was amazing, mashallah. Our next performer is a dear friend of mine. And I don't even want to read her bio, I just want to talk about her, but I'll read her bio. Laya Charara is a junior in the College of Al-Sinai, concentrating in English with a sub-concentration in creative writing. She immigrated from Lebanon with her family to seek educational opportunity and financial stability. Dearborn, Michigan is a surrogate hometown for her as one of the largest enclaves of Arab Americans in the US. She hopes to complete a master's of fine arts in creative writing and pursue a career in medicine soon after. On campus, she is external vice president for Doors of Opportunity, an organization founded by Fordson High School alumni who attend U of M. DOP's mission is to aid students in the Dearborn area and bridge the socioeconomic struggles faced by this predominantly immigrant community through providing educational and social resources. Laya also conducts clinical and biomedical research at UM's Kellogg Center with Dr. Raymond S. Douglas, who pioneers surgical and pharmacological treatments for Graves' eye disease. She enjoys slam poetry, writing short fiction, and utilizing intersectional frameworks such as women's studies and disability studies to understand identity. Please join me in welcoming one of my closest friends, Laya Charara.
Thank you so much, and I'm sorry for the slightly pretentious biography. It's the pre-med in me, I swear. Okay, so when I was told to perform poetry at this wonderful event so far, I've learned so much and it's been so insightful. I was kind of struggling with what I should share, and I was kind of trying to cloister myself to Islam and gender, and I realized there was no use in doing that. So I decided to write a piece that kind of combines almost 50 different poems that I could have written separately in a much shorter version. And I called it Words That Have Meaning When Affixed to Stanzas. Okay. Serious. Hajjis become engineers, theorizing about the inner workings of a blow dryer, how it produces the heated air which scents their daughter's Mediterranean hair with the essence of Judgment Day. That is unfortunate. They shake their heads, exclamations in Arabic are served with raw almonds, and conversation becomes laden with spring. Complicated. The way I sometimes wondered if God accepted prayers in English as I whispered disjointed Fusha and Levantine dialect felt as though I was having small talk on the sajda, forehead pressing against the turba with pressure measurable in pascals. I begin to appreciate chemistry, the way the prayer rug recognizes my sister's palms, leaves their shape printed, although they only visit when convenient. Home. Mother's elegant script as she scrolls the Fatiha for my 9-year-old eyes and tapes it onto bedside wardrobe next to favorite lip smackers poster. Obscene juxtaposition, but it helps me to remember these words, not glossy or coconut flavored, they are as batlawa, not baklava. And if I wanted to pick a holy flavor for lip gloss, it would be made of date paste and a hint of honey not sold in stores near you. Sassy. I am a unitless thing, digitless. You can't have these digits, they are hard-earned. One's own specific gravity, a weighted value that is mine and only mine. I am nobody's water. 1,000 kilograms per meter cubed. You won't learn these numerical curves in science class or any class. Nor am I an equation to be solved, unknowns revealed to worthy mathematicians. Veiled. Political first, spiritual secondary, because internal veils are more opaque than Turkish silk, but that is still my favorite type. When women with embroidered bags sell them, she has swatches of world for sale. Muslim Arab. Or is it Arab Muslim, priorities? Not so different from hyphenating last name, hybridized, I am like mother, still her father's daughter. She peels oranges with care, keeping their original skin intact. Poetry. Fairuz's verse is sometimes holy, like adhan emanating from minarets, grazing skies, like linking this realm to the next. I sometimes find faith in that which is most faithless. Conclusions. High heels removed at the front of the doormat, left laying on their side, golden lamp, light at mother's bedside, Quran recited in hushed tones as father slumbers. End. If only the akhirah came with exit signs, or even life for that matter, not that there is ever one path, left and right turns, all gravel and dirt roads converge on the same types of misery and success. That's the end of that one. So this next piece I wrote a while ago, but it's kind of, so I immigrated from Lebanon about 10 years ago, or 13 or 12 now. I always lose track because it's been a while. But so I've never been back yet, and I always envision going back, and I always envision the first things I want to do when I go back. So this piece I wrote kind of trying to embody what I would do when I go back, and without further ado, it's titled "Upon My Return." Upon my return. Upon my return to steep hills and buzzing reminders that I've some sweet blood in me, I will wander like a stranger. I will shuffle slowly, savoring disbelief, just coating my upper lip. The humidity does that since I'm returning in the summertime. I would not kill autumn. Just up the steep hill will be the mossy graveyard. I will take in sharp breaths of cold mountain air as I approach my grandparents, laid to rest side by side, still in disgruntled embrace. Sittu never hid her passion well enough, and Jiddu uncovered it too well. I will then kneel and wash the graves, deweed the surroundings, hoping to make an impression upon the dead. I may possibly kiss the graves, hoping that the dewy moisture of a southern Lebanon morning is the same as my tata's sweet kisses, the coarse weeds which brush against my pale cheeks, Jiddu's whiskered mustache. As is customary, I will touch the graves with my fingertips and read Surah Al-Fatiha, allowing the verses to be transferred first through sinews and then through various layers of marble and dirt. The dead have some unloading to do when the words reach them, soiled and misshapen, congealed with my emotions and the residues of a life well lived. The distinct scent of leather clings to the accented letters. The words console my grandparents. I am living a good life. I left them for good reasons. I will then collapse upon the paved road leading to my childhood, brushing my hands against rock walls, hoping to dust them with the same fine powder that always covered my clothes when I played hide and seek alone. I found myself often that it was so easy. I made too much noise and I always knew I was coming. I will lose myself again, purposely staining my hands with the forbidden pomegranates that Sittu guarded from our greedy grasps. Look for the strawberry patch planted some 20 years ago. They always manage to sprout no matter the circumstances. I will not find them. I will stop willing for a while and become a woman of whims, reverting to a child in the wheat fields. Women of whims will not be pleased with this joy, since it is no longer stolen. No half-smiling, half-frowning grandmother to bar her entry. Woman of whims will go back to her leather seats as she cannot deal without them. Woman of whims writes a poem on the plane back home, which home she cannot truly discern now. She will write about catharsis and how it is so fleeting. That's it.
I feel like I don't have words because that was so moving and so riveting. BRB, 1 second.
Okay, we're back. I thought you were really that moved, so you paused for a while.
No, I was moved, don't worry. So I'd like to introduce our feature act for tonight, Sister Tasleem Jamila Al-Hakim, internationally renowned poet, vocalist, lyricist, fashion designer, teacher, radio host, and more. That's a lot of hats to wear. Emerging from the spiritual boom of Chicago, she fuses her culture, tradition, and faith and heritage to create, inform, and heal with her heart. Tasleem has been a featured performer at many spoken word venues, universities, high schools, and festivals nationally and internationally. She has also lectured and conducted workshops on healing in art, female warrior style, power of verses, and how to connect to the universal family as an artist. At Northwestern University, several high schools, and Malcolm X College, just to name a few. In 2005, Tasleem released her first full-length project, a DVD, My Soul Speaks, through her company, My Soul Speaks Publishing. Her debut CD, entitled Tasleem, was released in 2008. Currently, she's completing an album called Activate, a poetry book by My Soul Speaks Publishing, Firdausee International Fashion Line, and an editor for Crossing Limits, an anthology of Muslim American and Jewish American poets. Tasleem has worked with Inner City Muslim Action Network on many levels, head event coordinator of Taking It to the Streets, main stage coordinator, host and performer at several community cafe events, hip hop and poetry workshops. She's been a facilitator with teens and is a current member of the Iman Arts Council. Please join me in welcoming Tasleem.
Assalamu alaikum, peace, and thank you for having me. Especially want to thank Sarah for her hospitality. She just has a beautiful heart, and everybody else who actually put this on. And I'm honored to be among the beautiful women that followed on the panel and the poetry. My poetry really speaks of, just kind of in my bio, just me growing up, my heritage, the things that influenced me just as a human being, as a spiritual being, as a mother, as a black woman in America, as a Muslim woman in America, just as a mother, and everything that encompasses. So you'll hear a little bit of everything in it, from my influence from hip hop, my influence from, I like lyrics, my influence from music. So I want to also thank Brad for coming out. He's playing here with me, with guitars. So this world, it's just so much that's going on right now with all the, the hate crimes, and it just makes me wonder, but I know, being a person of faith, there's always a divine plan behind it. But sometimes you might not understand everything. You may see, okay, I can see just only a drop of the bigger ocean. So. Heaven only knows, but I don't understand. Won't you tell me, please, 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 what is the master plan? It's been so many days, I'm sitting on these clouds, but heaven only knows. For now, I'll just move the crowd. 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 Sometimes through unknown vessels, Allah speaks. Through hard times and hard rhymes, truth leaks, words creep, warriors leap. Slowly and intentionally planting words to evoke action and change. Spin words into rainbows after the rain. Bringing back sanity after insane. Love and truth, so we breathe in ancestral fame. Firing words of warriors into flames. Getting down to the trenches where grass is not greener, but brown from spirits that stained. Replenishing soil, souls in the land. See, some of y'all sat down, but no, we were those who still taking a stand. Not faking a hand, we at war. We tied our ankles like the Sahabas, and well, we never ran. I said, we never ran. I said, we never ran. See, heaven only knows, but I don't understand. Won't you tell me, please, please, what is the master plan? It's been so many days I'm sitting on these clouds, but heaven only knows. For now I'll just move the crowd. about the revolution. See, Babylon cannot defeat us. This next piece is sort of, like I told you all, I love hip hop. So how many people love hip hop, like, or love just good lyrics, good words? And I'm talking about not some of the crap that you may hear on the, standard radio, but like real hip hop and lyricists. And so this is called Back in Them Days. And I know you all got some energy, so I'm gonna need it. And I want y'all to sing it with me. So sing it, I wanna hear your beautiful voices. And it's real simple. So it's nothing complicated. It's just back in them days, back in them days. Okay, y'all gonna sing it with me? Can't leave me hanging now, come on. Back in them days, back in them days, back in them days, back in them days. I can't hear you. Back in them days, 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 back in them days. Never weak, she speak from that ancient antique heat from the soul. So divine, reminded blind minds it's time to behold. See, she be straight on the path, so she never fold. Natural foods that exude from my body, so she won't corrode. The cold coals of deception and rejection felt like y'all might just explode, but she was foretold that she'd be bestowed to unload these warrior O's. Don't you know she got a spiritual flow and glow to make her lyrics occur like golden to herbs or African fields. She healed with the words. From Tennessee to overseas, they still play the CD on the streets by the herd, clear messes with the flow, singing soul not disturbed. She be ill with the rhymes, quite clever, but never absurd. And voice so fluid like a beautiful bird. Tasleem, Jamila, some of the best you heard. I'm taking it back in the days. Back in them days. Come on, y'all can do better than that. Back in them days. Back in them days. Back in them days. Back in them days. See, I'm mystical like a kufi wearing Sufi. A Buddhist chatting, eating sushi. A gangster gorilla, some call Sunni. Biblically baptized, quote Quranic wise. You see, y'all own this. Y'all still paying Chase Bank, you gotta loan this. Honing my skills so your brain strain, trying to comprehend my throne-ness, queen expertise, expounding exponentially grownness. Independent artist, but you still can't clone this. Respect claimed and I demanded it. Original oracle, spiritual flow and flyness, man, I branded it. Handed down in the script on lips like on shoes, see, I commanded it. I'm taking it back in them days. Back in them days. Back in them days. Back in them days. All right, I'm gonna let Brad play a little bit. Y'all keep it up to Brad. Finesse, mind blessed, no contest. Produce the tracks that compliment my lyrical freedom of press. A MC like Rakim, an MC light at best. I hope you hear the codes in my rhymes, real clear, scientifically engineered, and I'm so sincere. See, I be near to the celestial spheres. Negative energy disappear when I enter without fear. In tune with my God intuition. In tune with my divine mission, like a natural composition. I'm giving it organic nutrition, cause you crave to be saved. And when I'm so brave, like Harry Tubman, bring you back home from the cradle to the grave. I'm taking it back in the days. All right, I'm gonna need y'all to be more lively than this. So whenever I point to you, I want you to say back in the days, no matter what I say. You got it? And y'all over here, come on, I want to hear some deep voices. A lot of brothers over here. Okay, so y'all not gonna disappoint me, are you? Okay, so when I point to you, I'm taking it back in the days. When Kangos were swayed. Graffiti got sprayed. Wore cornrows and braids. Sometimes high tops and fades. My Pumas were suede. Revolutionaries were brave. Souls were getting saved. I'm taking back in them days. 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 Thank you. Y'all got better closet and shower singers in here. Everybody do that, so you know. The next piece is dedicated to the sisters, the women. One of my favorites I love to do, and also a dedication to the event, and it's Women's Month, History Month. And a lot of times as women, we nurture, we're natural nurturers, we like to nurture. And sometimes we really don't nurture ourselves, and we really don't dig deep into who we truly are as a higher being. So as teenagers, even adults, any man spitting the right words like, I love you. Oh sisters, we give it all up, or we're done, or we're through. But what we don't realize, see, we're looking for divine love that can only come from the Creator. You see, He created all creation with love, girl, so whose love could be greater? Aren't you tired of all these empty relationships? Oh, I love you, baby. Oh, I love you too. You see, real love comes from the divine source. Real love is divine love given to you that caresses your soul and connects you to your real being. You see, this is not me or you that you're physically seeing. I said our body is not us and we're not our body. See, we spend so much time on this. Is my clothes tight? Is my hair just right? Of course you take the best of care of your physical body, but what about also taking care of your soul? What about connecting to your real essence? What about letting your real self unfold? See, sisters, we spend so much time on this. Is my clothes tight? Is my hair just right? What about taking care of your soul? What about connecting to your real essence? What about letting your real self unfold? And some of us, what, we got 3 or 4 baby daddies and we're pregnant again? We got our children all confused when this madness gonna end. I said this body is not us and we're not our bodies. See, we confused about this. That's why we don't nurture and cherish our souls. That's why we go through the same old drama. That's why we never grow. But when you truly ask for that divine love that encompasses all, then you're able to love yourself, help others, then stand tall. See, most of y'all some liars. Because you say you love God and you love everybody else too. But how you gonna have love for someone else if you don't have love for you? I said, how you gonna have love for someone else if you don't have love for self? You see, we're so desperate. We just want to feel love from anybody who seems like he cares for us. And we wonder why it didn't work. See, it wasn't real in the first place. Then we left looking sick with disgust. See, I know, sister, you just want somebody to love you and not have to put up a front or a show, but God created you with love, girl. And here's the divine sisters, don't you know? See, it's okay to be by yourself when you're created for a little while. It's okay to take some time to love yourself. It's okay to take some time to reconcile. See, God said, why you spend so much time trying to please them and not me? You see, who's the one that determines your decree? You see, when God gives you that divine love, that's love that you can give back from your heart unconditionally. That's when divine mercy, oceans, blessings, power takes over and possesses you from deep. So don't just try to get someone to help your material gain, because in the end, you've only cheated your soul again. And when the soul is activated, it could be dynamic on this physical plane, and then you too could drop from the heavens to maintain. See, sister, when God loves you, I say when God truly loves you, that's all that really needs to be said. He'll give you all things, material, physical, spiritual, in all ways you'll be fed. And then your beauty, see, it'll be a real beauty, not just this thick layer of skin, because real beauty, divine beauty, girl, that emanates from the soul within. And then your false sense of self will start to disappear, and you for real will start to come clear. See, you can't measure the soul because it has an unlimited connection that'll give you an unlimited direction. See, this is only one ray of our physical form, so don't let your mind trick you to conform. You see, you a paradise being. So take your place on your throne, you paradise queen. See, you and your Lord's relationship should be as tight as this, so no man or woman can come between it. And then when you do get that soulmate, who you've been waiting for, you're not starving for someone to tell you how beautiful and special you are to feel complete once more. Your relationship is based on divine love, power, and trust. It won't be based on drama, confusion, madness, and lust. And then you're able to be that real role model for your children and emulate the crown and creation that you are for them to demonstrate. So it don't matter, sisters, whatever we've been through. See, we all have a divine destiny. So pray, God, please bring out the best in me. And then you'll truly be able to have that unconditional divine love for someone else. Because you'll have that unconditional divine love for yourself. So everybody's good? Good? Okay. The next piece I'm actually going to do is talking about, I think we talked a lot about this when they talked about it on the panel, about us, and like I always say, we're spiritual beings. And a lot of times we focus so much on our physical, but this is called assault on our senses. And it's really just talking about what's going on as a whole, like in society, how much we spend so much time on just the 5 senses. We get so caught up. But what about our existence that was here before the physical existence and that will be here after in eternity? So this is kind of what this is. And I want y'all to say this with me. Feeling, smell, taste, and touch and sound. Okay, say it with me. Feeling, smell, taste, and touch and sound. Feeling, smell, taste, and touch and sound. Come on, say it with me. The 5 senses, y'all in college, y'all know this. Come on. Feeling, smell, taste, and touch and sound. Feeling, smell, taste, and touch and sound. Feeling, smell, taste, and touch and sound. We're not from this world, we're just touching down. Feeling, smell, taste, and touch and sound. Feeling, smell, taste, and touch and sound. Feeling, smell, taste, and touch and sound. We're not from this world, we're just touching down. This assault on our senses has made us senseless. We broken, we got major ghetto expenses. And we up in the hood defenseless, defenseless. And when true deliberation comes to us, well, some of us just put up our defenses, our defenses, our defenses. I wonder where these inherited habits first came from, where the vibration of my name's from, where my uncle got his game from, because he still got tendencies of Hennessy. So I want to take y'all way back to the beginning like our Fatiha and Genesis, because I know some just don't inherit bliss. But I wonder why some not on the path to righteousness. See, what difference those who strive in God's path from those who fall in God's wrath, who don't even know they need a spiritually cleansing bath? See, we function from half souls, we don't function from half. See, money, sex, and fame, feeding off a worldly acclaim. These so-called revolutionaries, man, they losing their game, public displaying their shame like some animals that need to be tamed. See, this world is just a hypocrisy. We got world leaders who preaching democracy. They live a life of hypocrisy. They got world leaders by bureaucracy. See, this assault on our senses has made us senseless. We broken, we got major ghetto expenses. And we up in the hood defenseless, defenseless. See, I say let's take it back to the old school. Let's clean up the hood and roll up on these fools. Let's use some real 1960s gangsters tactics and tools. Because we up in the hood with so many hidden jewels that are left dormant within. It's time to fight these gin and diminish these sin. Because we got prescribed identities appealing to our senses through false body images and Botox fixtures, liposuctions, titty rejections, and lip injections. And we up in the hood with HIV and STD infections. And we wouldn't even know we created 7 heavenly stages. Because we drifted way back to the dark ages. Souls accept the minimum wages. Because we too impatient to reach our heavenly stations. Feeling, smell, taste, and touch and sound. Feeling, smell, taste, and touch and sound. Feeling, smell, taste, and touch and sound. We're not from this world, we're just touching down, touching down, touching down, touching down. Ooh. Let's do one more and that's it. Call it my poem where I just need some get up and go against negativity, and it speaks for itself. That's okay, I don't mind her noise, I'm used to it, so. I'm coming like a bat out of hell because I'm just plain tired of all the haters on the outside and inside me, but they just got fired. You see, my soul is not for hire. My real intention be God's desires. That's why I'm constantly, continuously, and endlessly inspired. You see, some people's negative energy be so thick I can see it before I turn around in the back of me. Coming from the right, the left, all angles like it's smacking me. Trying to figure out where I'm going and what I'm doing, may they be tracking me. But God surrounds me like 100-foot cement wall against those attacking me, so ain't no backtracking me. On my road through heaven, I got to run through hell. But I'm leaving poetry pages for generations to code my warrior trails. It's like I got reincarnated Muhammad and Malcolm X, Adams, and Sales. They say being a little black girl in America, you stripped and molested before birth. So as a baby, my first thirst was to be quenched with knowledge and wisdom when I was nursed. So I wouldn't just stay hyped up, never devoting, but just quoting the latest Quran or Bible verse. See, I'm the daughter of those millions who were martyred, slaughtered, saints, and headstrong, who worked in 100-degree weather and carried babies on their hips and their backbones, who knew they were spiritual first and led victories at war. They made Salat at modest tombstones. Through any adversities, they kept strong. See, in the city and the suburbs, everybody's confused. Illusional lifestyles misused. So-called role models, man, even their parents confused. See, their children need to eat my words for breakfast, so they have some real nourishment before school. Bathed and baptized in my lyrics, so in the summertime they stay cool. You see, most people, they phony, they transparent, they see through. It's kind of like we all cross-eyed because we look at each other and we see too. Some just can't see truth because they backed up like 50 years of backed up semen. Fake flossing on the outside, but inside they screaming because they too impatient to reach their own demons. See, God has taken me through struggle to end at perfection, to completely cure and heal any of my imperfections. See, I want to be like those who are no longer in need of reading books to teach. I want to be like those who believe in God's powers to reach. I want to be like those whose actions line up with the words that they speak. See, y'all, it's real out here. People stay stressed, depressed, hyped up, and they stay blunted. So that's why I don't stay stagnated and stunted. And I'm striving hard and well breathless, but I'm never restless. That's why I gotta come like a bat out of hell, because I'm just plain tired of all the haters on the outside and inside me. They just got fired. You see, my soul is not for hire. My real intention be God's desires. That's why I'm constantly, continuously, and endlessly inspired. See, I'm a revolutionary, freeing souls without retire. Thank you very much.
Wow, I know I keep coming up here and saying wow, but I think it's warranted. Thank you so much, Tasleem. That was brilliant. So I just want to say a couple thank yous. This is the end of our night. This event would not have been possible without the support of different campus units. Thank you to Gloria Thomas from Center for Education of Women, Erica Williams at Mesa, Donna Ainsworth with the Women's Studies Department, Diversity Education, and the hardworking Muslim women, part of the Gender and Islam Symposium Planning Committee. Thank you to Hafsa Kanjwal for her guidance. Many thanks to my support system who worked tirelessly to put this on. Iman Abdulhadi, Noor Haider, Zainab Abu Nabi, Aisha Usmani, Nada Hakim, Omar Sheikh, Iman Tabaja, and especially Zainab Khalil. You are all my role models. Thank you so much for helping me make this happen. Thank you to the outgoing and incoming MSA e-boarders for your support. And I'd like to thank our wonderful, brilliant, diverse, amazing women who were the panelists and performers today. And thank you for allowing me to be your MC. This event was very close to my heart, and inshallah the MSA will continue to put on events like this in the future. Have a wonderful night.